Hello, we're going to take a look at Steve Jobs today. We're going to find out what happened to him after he basically got fired from Apple and what did he do. Now, he really was a very influential person in technology. Back when all this was happening, these iPhones were coming out and kind of Apple was being reborn, which we're going to take a look at. I had tons of students. Oh, I hate Steve Jobs. All he is just a really good salesman. He's just a good salesman. That's what he is. And I really felt unfortunate for them because he was a lot more than that. And sometimes I would, pick up the task and say, well, actually, he did these things and that thing. But a lot of times just starting arguments. So I would just go, yeah, whatever. But of course, a lot of this I did not experience, right? I was over on the Microsoft side of things and have been really there for the majority of my life. And so I didn't really know what he was doing at the time. That's stuff I figured out later. I also want to show you something about dealing with difficult situations and public speaking, that kind of thing in this video, and we'll kind of use him as an example. So let's go ahead and get started. Here we are on that screen. Sorry, give me a sec. I gotta move controls around because they're always in the way. All right, where we're gonna start is this iMac. This was the time in Apple when really they were about to die. And I'm not joking. Steve Jobs comes back and is like trying to generate excitement for a computer that really doesn't have anything exciting to tell anybody. So they made him different colors and they made him clearer. And this is, I can't remember what color that was, but they had a purple one that, and they didn't call it purple, right? They called it grape. And the red one was cherry. Anyway, these are collectible now if you have a super, really, really nice one. But back then, I always thought that was really silly. I thought the design looked stupid. And it was really like, hey, here we are, Apple. We're still around. Come buy a computer from us. Now, really what the problem was is that Apple, so let's look up Mac OS 9. They really had a problem with implementing technology, and it was really a downhill slide once Steve Jobs left. Now, I don't know any way that Apple would have survived with Steve Jobs at the helm at that time. But then again, he was like 22, 23 years old running a multi-billion-dollar company. And people like him, if you look at these ones that are real innovators that are kind of out there on the edge, they usually are hard to deal with, and they tend to have all this different stuff that they want to do, and that stresses people out. Anyway, to this story, right? The operating system on a computer is so much of what the computer can do, and they really were just rehashing the same thing that they had done from the first time that the Mac was built. They didn't have any true multitasking built into this. I remember it being very funny to me, that they would often say Mac 87 equals Windows 95. Now, as I say in my stuff about Windows 95, I don't think it was the best operating system out there, but it really was fantastic compared to what Mac was doing. How did Apple respond to the release of Windows 95? Well, that's what they did. That's basically what they said. And if you don't get what they're saying, right, what they're saying is, hey, we had Windows 95 like technologies back in 1987. So you guys suck, right? That's basically what they were doing. And it wasn't true at all. When Steve Jobs came back years later, they asked him, why did Apple falter? Why did they not why did they go downhill and almost die? And he said, well, they failed to innovate, right? If you fail to innovate in technology, then you're going to be dead in a few years. And that's what was happening to them. So what happens is Apple sales just plummet year after year after year. There you go. You can get one of those badges. So year after year, it just keeps going down. And not joking, by the time they get Steve Jobs back on board, I had a friend that worked there. And he said they were probably a couple of weeks from closing their doors. I will get into him. That'll distract me. Anyway, so yeah, they were a couple of weeks from closing their doors. They weren't making enough money. Nobody was selling their computers, and this is pre-internet, right? So you don't just build a website and say buy computers off of your website. There was nobody selling them back then. That was the days of the only ones that survived: Best Buy, Circuit City, and there was a slew of other ones. There was Newegg, if you're familiar with that website. They used to have stores, right? And basically nobody was wanting to sell them, because I think in the tech world, they all looked at them and said, what are we going to do? Keep like 2 of those on hand for people that want to buy them? It's a waste of time. We'll use the floor space elsewhere. So Steve Jobs comes back, and several things happen at that point. And one of the things that pretty much precipitates him coming back is Apple has decided their operating system really stinks, and they have nowhere to take it, and they don't have the talent anymore, because most of their talent has jumped ship and left. As a matter of fact, 2 of them went off and made BOS. So they went out and made that, and I mentioned that in my Windows thing, that this was a competitor to Windows. And what happens is Apple comes to them and says, hey, you want to sell us BOS? And obviously there's some real hateful feelings there. And they're like, yeah, sure, for $650 million, that's what it's worth. And they're like, well, we can't afford that, right? We're going under. We can't afford that. This was a true multitasking, kind of built around multimedia, because that was a big thing at the time. You know, internet was there and all that, and it was young. And so they don't buy that. So then they go over to another struggling company. So, didn't spell it right. Next step. So yeah, Bill Gates' company is kind of struggling. Now it's not doing as bad as Apple is, but they've got this really niche market, or niche market, where these kind of next computers are really high-powered computers, and they're only being used really in the scientific community. Those are the only people that can afford them. And they last for a very long time in those communities, but that's not enough to really keep you going, right? And so they come over and say, hey, we need an OS. Maybe we could buy Next Step off of you. And I imagine there was a huge amount of ego involved in that. The fact that here comes Apple and they failed without me, and now they want to buy my stuff, right? That's got to be a huge portion of this. And so he's like, yeah, sure, yeah. And he gives them a reasonable price, right? They talk about finances and all that. And he gives them a reasonable price, and then they buy Next Step. And then this is kind of funny. I'm like, why is this a YouTube video at all? Difference between Next Step and Mac OS. Basically, Next Step becomes Mac OS. And back then it was called OS 10. And Steve Jobs swore that X didn't have anything to do with the fact that it was built on Unix, right? So you've got this really massively stable operating system that's a Unix-based operating system, and it doesn't matter if Windows is everywhere. Anybody in technology knows what Unix is and knows that it's much more stable than Windows is. And so that's what servers ran on, and big high performance stuff ran on. It just works, right? And it was Unix with a nice interface. And you can kind of see that, that's what everybody was doing gray back then. You can kind of see that. And again, I'm not sure what video this is in, but I mentioned the fact that I didn't know that this really even existed too much. I kind of knew. And then I was using Windows NT 4, which I'll show you in just a minute, and other operating systems, Windows 95, of course. And I didn't realize that basically what was happening is Bill Gates was taking this, or the team was taking anything that was in Next Step and putting it into their versions of Windows as they came out. It's like, where was their inspiration? Hey, where was their inspiration? So if we look at NT4, that was a big one. Right? Oh, it's got it's green on the back, right? More color, but when you look at the interface, it's like, that's very similar, doesn't it? Very similar. Now, obviously, I do think that there was really something about trying to make everything similar so people wouldn't freak out when they used a different operating system. But I think definitely Microsoft was looking at what was happening on Next Step, that they probably owned one, right? And they're looking at the development of that and saying, that's cool, let's add that over time. It's always cheaper in any industry, but especially in technology, to just copy rather than innovate. Innovation is called research and development, and it takes a lot of money to do research and development. You're going to research and develop a lot of things that'll never make any money. So when you land on that thing that does, then everybody else just copies it because it was cheaper for them to do. Anyway, so what ends up happening is Mr. Jobs gets hired back as the CEO to basically last ditch effort. Let's try to save Apple. And so that's when they make the colored computers, you know, and they're all kind of fancy, just trying to get attention. This is funny. This is point. I'm going to find a video. iMac Puck mouse. That is the dumbest thing that I have ever seen in my life, right? There's a reason why you create a mouse a certain way. These are going to be much more comfortable than that. That was the dumbest thing. There's actually, go back, let me go to videos. Dang it. There's a video of him hawking this, and I can't find it. It's probably been taken down. But he stands up there, look at this revolutionary new mouse and how incredible this mouse is. And it's like, wow, that's a tough sell, dude. That is the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life. So they were really trying to get attention. And of course, the crazy thing is that in this process of doing this translucence and everything, all these other PC makers try to copy them. It's like, that's really cool. And people want that, but they don't want it on a Mac. They want it on a Windows machine. So we'll copy those things. A couple of companies got sued for that. In any case, let me pull up, this is what we're going to next. How do you spell heckler? Insult response. So this is the same video. And we're going to look at that in just a minute. So when he comes back, he has to go through and cut all these projects, right? Because they can't afford to have all these projects running. And that really ticks some people off. And I like to show this video again because it really shows you, if you watch a bunch of videos about him when he was younger, you'll see how much he's matured by this point, and he's realized you can't do what he did when he was young. And the amazing thing is when people would ask him about that kind of situation, like, how do you explain what you did? He was like, I was dumb and I was young. And it's like, wow, that's really honest. He didn't try to make up stuff. So let's take a look at, that's the highest quality. So let me see if this is the one. I'm just going to play it. It should pick it up here. It's only 5 minutes long. And what I want you to do is take a look, especially, or listen, especially, for how he diffuses the situation and then how he explains things. I'll stop it along the way to point a few things out. So let me make sure that we're going to pick this up nice.
Mr. Jobs, you're a bright and influential man.
Here it comes.
It's sad and clear that on several counts you've discussed, you don't know what you're talking about.
So we'll pause it right there. That's a pretty big slam. That's basically saying, you know, you're bright and you're influential. Everybody knows you're very influential, and you influence people too. But on several occasions, it's very clear you don't know what you're talking about. Right? How do you deal with that? Now, Steve Jobs in the past, when he was young, probably would have just slammed him and just made him look like an idiot.
I would like, for example, for you to express in clear terms how, say, Java, in any of its incarnations, addresses the ideas embodied in OpenDoc. And when you're finished with that, perhaps you could tell us what you personally have been doing for the last 7 years.
Okay, so you just really brief. OpenDoc was this really cool programming, could do a ton of stuff. Java was really gaining speed and attention, and you notice Java is still around. And Java was really this open platform that you could do all these different things on. But OpenDoc definitely did things that Java could not do very cleanly and very nicely. And all this stuff doesn't matter because the internet happened, and then Java really took off. So it doesn't really matter. But he's basically saying, I want you to tell me in clear terms, because I don't think you can actually tell me how Java is better. And then tell us what you've been doing. That was actually his question. Now see what happens. Okay, so right there, if you notice when he brings that water back to me, because I show this to students every semester. So this looks like, I would like to come down there and smack you in the face, right? It's just like, we all kind of feel those things. That's why I like this video, because you can see that. You can see that he is like, holy crap, I'm trying to do something here and I'm in charge of this company, and I got to deal with you, right? And he reins that in. I don't know what your life is going to be like, but there's always times in meetings where somebody's going to disagree with you, and the ability to pull back and be able to say, okay, how should I approach this, and breathe, count to 10, whatever you need to do, and then try to state what you're doing is vital.
You can please some of the people some of the time, but one of the hardest things when you're trying to affect change is that people like this gentleman are right in some areas. I'm sure that there are some things OpenDoc does, probably even more that I'm not familiar with, that nothing else out there does. And I'm sure that you can make some demos, maybe a small commercial app that demonstrates those things.
Okay, so to pause right there to give you some behind the scenes stuff, he basically is saying, hey, I'm sure you're right in some ways. And then there's like this little underhanded insult, like you could probably make some demos and show them off, because he knows that's what you do, right? Engineers, I got this great idea. Here's how it works and functions. Here's a little app I made. See, it's awesome. And then he, lands the bomb.
The hardest thing is how does that fit in to a cohesive, larger vision that's going to allow you to sell $8 billion, $10 billion of product a year?
So he's taking the opportunity to identify and then educate, right? It's like, I get what you're saying, dude. That probably is awesome. And you can probably show how awesome it is with a couple of demos and an app. But how does that fit into us actually saving our butts here, where we can sell a bunch of stuff? In other words, you're not thinking of that, are you?
And one of the things I've always found is that
the nerddom of the 90s.
You've got to start with the customer experience and work backwards to the technology.
All right, so we get some claps for that, but that is a huge, huge, huge ideological message that everybody in IT needs to understand. So I'm going to back it up just a bit, let you hear it again.
Customer experience and work backwards to the technology. You can't start with the technology and try to figure out where you're going to try to sell it. And I've made this mistake probably more than anybody else in this room. And I've got the scar tissue to prove it. And I know that it's the case. So
basically what he's saying is, in a very open way, I'm willing to share all the worst things that I've done, where I've almost totally obliterated a company. And I know that you have to start with the user experience and then work backwards from there. This is a thing that he pushed. It was something that made him the genius that he is. I'm not joking, because everything that they were going to try to sell, it's like, what is this person going to do with it? What is a teenager going to do with it? What is an adult going to do with it? What is a grandma going to do with it? How is this going to function for that individual and change their life in some meaningful way that they'll actually buy this product and move forward with it? And you think, oh, well, that makes sense. But for some reason, when you start looking at the tech companies, they tend to do exactly what that guy just said, right? Hey, this is really cool technology. Let's shove it into Windows 8. Let's shove it into Windows 10. That's a really cool technology. Let's shove it in. And then it doesn't do anything for the user except make their OS bigger. And because of the process of the iPhone becoming so huge and the iPad becoming so huge and Apple sales going up, while other makers went down, then all those other makers that are competing with them are starting to go, wait, maybe we should be doing the same thing. And that fundamentally changed our industry for the better, at least for right now.
And as we have tried to come up with a strategy and a vision for Apple, it started with what incredible benefits can we give to the customer? Where can we take the customer? Not starting with, let's sit down with the engineers and figure out what awesome technology we have, and then how are we going to market that? And I think that's the right path to take. I remember with the laser writer, we built the world's first small laser printers, you know, and there was awesome technology in that box. We had the first Canon laser printing, cheap laser printing engine in the world, in the United States here at Apple. We had a very wonderful printer controller that we designed. We had Adobe's PostScript software in there. We had Apple Talk in there. Just awesome technology in the box. And I remember seeing the first printout come out of it and just picking it up and looking at it and thinking, you know, we can sell this, because you don't have to know anything about what's in that box. All we have to do is hold this up and go, do you want this? And if you can remember back to 1984, before laser printers, it was pretty startling to see that. People went, whoa, yes. And that's where Apple's got to get back to. And, you know, I'm sorry that OpenDoc's a casualty along the way. And I readily admit there are many things in life that I don't have the faintest idea what I'm talking about. So I apologize for that too. But there's a whole lot of people working super, super hard right now at Apple. You know, Avi, John, Garino, Fred. I mean, the whole team is working, burning the midnight oil, trying to, and people, you know, hundreds of people below them to execute on some of these things, and they're doing their best. And I think that what we need to do, and some mistakes will be made, by the way. Some mistakes will be made along the way. That's good, because at least some decisions are being made along the way. And we'll find the mistakes, we'll fix them. And I think what we need to do is support that team going through this very important stage as they work their butts off. They're all getting calls, being offered 3 times as much money to go do this, do that. The valley's hot. None of them are leaving. And I think we need to support them and see them through this and write some damn good applications to support Apple out in the market. That's my own point of view. Mistakes will be made. Some people will be pissed off. Some people will not know what they're talking about. But I think it is so much better than where things were not very long ago. And I think we're going to get there.
So that really summed up what was happening at Apple at the time. They're really like, hey, we got too much we're doing. We got to cut all this out. We got some great stuff. One of the casualties of that was the Apple Newton. I spelled that. I just butchered that, didn't I? Anyway, so here's the Apple Newton. It was one of the first handheld computers, and it was very powerful and had a really loyal following. And there was a lot of people really upset when this went away, because they were just like, that was a successful product that you were making, and why did you take it? And I was like, we can't afford to do it. But None of the computer stuff ends up saving them. What ends up saving them is something that's happening in the music industry. So if we look at something like Winamp, anybody ever used Winamp? Winamp was a big deal back then, and why it was a big deal is because everybody was taking their CDs and they were making them and turning them into MP3s. They were ripping the CDs, is what we called it back then. And then they started using file sharing, right? So peer-to-peer file sharing over the internet, where now that you can just download all this music. Well, Steve Jobs took a look at what was happening in that industry and actually understood. And to me, I think he understood it because he'd already gone through the PC revolution, 20 years earlier, and he learned some things from that and saw it happening again. Again, that's the biggest reason why we go through some of this history, because if you can remember any of this, you'll be out there 10 years from now going, oh, hey, this is like what McBride said about the iPod. Huh? Oh, yeah, this is going to be big. Now, that's great if you want to be an investment, to know what the next big thing is going to be. But for people in IT, what it means is your job is to support all this stuff. Your job is to make sure it's working. Your job is to make sure that you're innovative and have this stuff available. And we'll look at the iPhone and what happened with the coming forth of the iPhone and how actually IT people started losing their jobs because of their attitude, because they didn't understand what was happening. And they really saw the iPhone as this, that's just that's a fad. People buy it because, again, let's just not say that Steve Jobs knows anything. He's just a good salesman. So people are getting swayed by him. And it really ended up hurting people in their careers. And if they had just been looking at technology and understanding this is where it's taking us, then they would have seen it and said, no, that's a major shift. And everybody else is going to be following them because for some reason, Apple got that right. Oh, wait, why did they get that right? They got that right because Steve Jobs' motivation was start with the user experience and work backwards. So the user experience on that iPhone ended up to be great. And that's why people bought it, not because it was the thing to do at the time because it was cool. I know that because I didn't buy an iPhone. I didn't need it. The experience for me was fine with the smartphone I had. So going back to this, we've got all these people that are just taking MP3s off the internet. And so the question is why? Why would people spend hours and hours stealing music? Because honestly, that's what they're doing. Well, if you understood at the time, I did. I was like, wait, so I got this, group that I like, and I'm going to go and buy some music. And then I go down to the store and I'm like, $20. I only have this one song on this CD that I want, but I'm going to spend $20 for that one song. See, that's, as a consumer, that's how I feel. Now, somebody's selling the music, they're going, oh, well, there's 15 songs on there, right? And it's no, I only want one of them. And maybe I end up liking 3 of the songs and I paid for 15. I don't like this idea. Since there's no other option, I'll just go out to the internet and download the songs I like. And now I have them. So this was not the first. A lot of people think the iPod is the first. This is the first gen right here. They say, oh, the first media player was Apple's iPod. No, HP made one. They were the first. Creative Labs had some. Sony was doing stuff. Everybody understood that we should make something that these MP3s can be played on. But of course, what happened was they created something that actually worked. Now, you may say, oh, McBride, you're slanted towards them or whatever. I'm telling you from my personal experience, right? I was not somebody that was going to go buy something from Apple for more money. I wasn't going to do that. And so I had a Sony Clay, which I think that's how you say it, which was a PDA and also could play music. The thing drove me nuts because I'd put music on it, I would create a playlist, and then I would lose the playlist. And all my music's still there, but the playlist isn't. So I make the playlist again, and now half the music is gone. And then when I put it on the computer, it shows the music, but it's not. Oh my goodness. And that was across the board. People were using little creative Rios and stuff like that. And they all were just, they kind of worked. They kind of did what they were supposed to do. But when Apple released their product, it was like, this does exactly what you want it to do every single time you start it up. And it's so easy to find your music, load your music, create playlists, just working with it. And to me, in technology, I'm thinking, how can these other technology companies be that stupid? Right? Sony's such a big name, especially at that time. Why didn't this thing just work for me? Why did I have to wait? Probably, I don't know, because I didn't wait. I got an Apple iPod instead. But I'm sure 3 or 4 revisions after that, then the Sony had it down. But Sony was the music people. Why didn't it just work? Why? I didn't understand it at all. So I always like to point out, like, a lot of times you'll see things happening in society and a lot of people will just go, oh, that's because Steve Jobs sells things really well. Oh, that's because everybody wants to buy Google. Now, eventually that kind of thing does happen, but you have to hit the tipping point. You have to hit where most of society has now adopted whatever that technology is. And then then the laggards, then the late starts are the ones that are going, well, I guess I'll get one of those because that's what everybody has. That does exist, but in the initial beginning, that is not what it does, right? When you look at Chrome as the big dog now, they're everything, and people will not use Microsoft Edge, but only to go and download Chrome, and then they ditch Edge altogether. Now, that is because everybody uses Chrome and people want to be part of a society and not be made fun of, even down to the browser level. And so they'll go through that process just because that's what society says. So that's what I'm going to do. But initially, right, what was the competitor? They had this big bloated Microsoft Internet Explorer. It was slow at everything it did. Sometimes it didn't display things right. And so what did Google do? They created a super small and light browser that did nothing but browse pages, right? Pull up web pages. That's all it did. And they got traction with that. And then, of course, now most students will tell me Chrome is bloated and it's big and it uses too much of the processor. And even when it's not actually on your screen, it's using the processor. And so a lot of people, in tech move away from that and get something like Opera or Opera GX or something that's small and light. Because now, see, Chrome has gotten to the point where it doesn't need to compute. It doesn't need to convince you to use it. You already believe you have to or need to. So there is that tipping point. But in the beginning, people are buying these because they do exactly what they're supposed to do, and they do it well and easy. This is what saves Apple. Now, that's really not something I ever looked at and ever dug into, and I will be honest, the media didn't ever talk about it then. But I had a friend that worked there. He was actually a part of the Apple stores, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. But he said, oh yeah, right now, 80% of our sales is coming from iPods. They're not coming from Macs. So 20% from selling these computers. And that gets all the media attention, right? That gets people going, oh, they got a new Mac. And the iPods kind of, not really, they don't get really much, but they're making 80% of their profits off of these devices. So now think of the issue that's going on behind the scenes of we need to be able to sell computers, right? So this is happening around the same time that the iPad is first introduced right here. Well, what do? Close your doors? Nobody's selling them. You can't do the online thing because that doesn't even exist yet. You can show them online, but there's no buy it now, right? What are you going to do? Well, you do. You either surrender and say our company's over, or you do something like Jack Tramiel would have done, or Steve Jobs did. Say, we're going to go and make our own stores. That's nuts. That's crazy. As a matter of fact, it got a lot of publicity and like, this person's stupid. Obviously, Steve Jobs is not the genius that people thought he was, because why would you build a store, right? You got Circuit City, and they would state it, right? They'd say, yeah, but Circuit City won't sell our computers for us anymore. They don't give us floor space to do that. What are we going to do? Give up? And they'd say that, but everybody would kind of ignore, yeah, why you guys are stupid building that thing. So let's actually look. And, in traditional fashion, this is a Steve Jobs thing. He said, you know what? If we're going to bring out a store, we're going to do it better than anybody else has ever done it before. And of course, they opened store after store after store. Again, my friend was part of team that's basically like, how should we make these things? They are basically at the end of their life. So taking some money that they really don't have and putting it in and making sure it's done right, that's a critical idea. And making it so that if somebody was walking by and didn't know any difference, they'd look and go, whoa, what is that place? I think I'm going to go in there because it looks pretty cool. I don't even know what this place is. And then they would come in and then it was, it's pretty straightforward. If you've never been to an Apple store, you really need to go. Over at Chandler Fashion Center or the Chandler Mall, there is a Microsoft store and there is an Apple store. And I'll talk about the Microsoft one in a minute. But come on, look, that's pretty plain, right? So really all they're doing, the only thing that they're really doing is they're saying, look, how do we show off our devices more than anything else? So when you walk into the store, you see the devices. And then they did something incredible that was not happening at the Walmarts, that was not happening in the Best Buys. You could actually just come in and use a computer, which you still can. I tell people all the time, it's like, oh, you're thinking about getting a Mac. Have you ever used one? And they're like, no, not really. I said, well, you need to go to an Apple store then. Some people are going to like it and some people are not. The best thing you can do is go try it out. And you can walk up to this computer right there and just use it. And so do it, go do it. I'll say the same thing. Oh, I've used Android forever. I don't know if I want an iPhone. Well, you should go to an Apple store and just use it because you may not like it and you don't want to spend all that money and go, I really don't like this. Right. So they really gave a way to get everything. You can buy this stuff, right? You got to walk up and say, I want to buy one of these, but they get everything out of the way. And here's our product. Use our product. And that seems pretty straightforward to me. At first, everybody laughed at them. At first, they just said, this is stupid. These people don't know what they're doing. But given the fact that nobody's selling their product, what other options do they really have? And if they're going to do it, like Steve Jobs says, right? Well, let's do this. They're not going to make it look like a Best Buy. They're going to get some attention for it. This is the store in Dubai. Right. And so, I mean, if you're in Dubai, which, I mean, if you haven't looked at what that city's got in it, it needs to be a certain standard. Otherwise, they're not going to even let you do it. Just beautiful stores. And it's a strange thing to me that I loved to make fun of at the time was the fact that there was people that would go around at these Apple store openings. Like they would travel to Japan for a Japanese Apple store opening. I was like, that's nuts. That's just, talk about a cult, right? That's just weird. But that's not something that Apple's ever promoted. That's not something that they've ever said, oh, go do this. It just happened. It just happened because of what they made. Now, this is a good picture here. If you've never been to an Apple store, if you pass by one, you will see it busy. Very rarely is there only 2 or 3 people in here. It's busy. There's always people in there. And that's why I say, hey, go to the Chandler Fashion Center because they've got a Microsoft store. And I'm telling you, I really like the Microsoft store. It's got color, for instance. What is the deal with Steve Jobs and no color? I don't know. But anyway, there's hardly anybody in there. There isn't. I mean, the Microsoft store is so nice. It's like, I want to buy an Xbox here. You already have an Xbox. I know, but I want to buy one. It's really good. But it's not nearly as busy. Now, where did that store come from? Well, once you start getting all these Apple stores all over the flipping world, and it's never leaving the news. And now the design of them is being used in classes to teach people how to market and how to sell. Now it's like, oh, we need a store. Microsoft's like, our products are dipping and nobody's looking at our products, so we need a store. And other places, the Samsung stores. Right? If you've been in a Samsung, you kind of know where they got their design from, right? It's like, hey, let's just do what Apple did. In any case, those two things are happening at the same time of the iPod sales just blowing through the roof and saving the company, and them creating these stores that allow people to come in and experience their products the way they want them experienced, instead of right there in Walmart with the screen broken and it won't turn on anymore and that kind of thing, which is really good. Now, let's bring you to how did this happen? How did this iPhone happen? We're going to put in first gen. And lots of people at the time were really critical. What does Apple think they're doing? The smartphone market has been around forever. And these people are so dumb and stupid. And why do they think they can get into the phone market? They're dumb. You know, Microsoft was basically like, the smartphone market is a niche. We've been there forever. And the big player at the time was BlackBerry. You probably don't even know who they are. And basically Google was going to make a phone once they started seeing what was happening, that there was rumors that the Apple phone was going to be made. There it is. One of the things they said was, that's too big. This is way too big. Nobody wants a big phone like that. Another thing they said is, it doesn't have a keyboard. If we're going to use it, we got to have a keyboard. That's ridiculous. It doesn't have one. They said all these weird things. Now, you probably understand at this point why Apple made an iPhone. But if you don't, that goes back to the iPod. Now, the that was just advertisement to mean it has internet, because back then not everything did. So if you're looking at, hey, 80% of what we do that keeps us alive is now going over to these smartphones. And people are starting to put all that music on their smartphones. What do you think is going to happen to our iPod, guys? Yeah, it's dead. Right? Maybe you can mooch it for 10. There's still people that buy iPods. They're still out there, but most people don't. It's not the thing anymore. And we'll get into why. But they had to make an iPhone. Otherwise, they would have lost all the business they had with their iPod. If all the music is switching over to smartphones, then they better get in that market. Otherwise, somebody else will get into it and they'll be gone. But if we're going to get into that market, we need to make sure it's like our Apple stores, like it's like our iPods. How do we make what all these people have done with their smartphone? How do we make all that better so somebody will actually notice us? Because if we make something that's as good as a Microsoft phone or as good as a BlackBerry, then we're not going to get much traction. We need to fix the problems that they haven't fixed, which is exactly what they did. One of the biggest things, because back then people actually used their phones to call, their smartphones. You could actually listen to messages in any order. Yeah, I know it's like, that's a big technology. Well, it is when you get pissed off at your smartphone because it just goes to your voicemail and you have no controls. You just have to listen and go, oh, okay, delete it. Skip that one. Skip that one. You know, instead you could just hit it. That's one of the improvements. I didn't have an iPhone. I was one of those people that basically was like, you know what, I got a smartphone and I'm good. And I didn't mind the fact, like on Windows, like if we look at this, this is basically, oh, these are Blackberries and Trios. So we'll look at, we'll say Windows CE phone. That'll pull up something. So this was their phones that ran Windows, really fancy. You know, it was like having Windows. This one would have been very, very much. You click here, start menu pops down. Very good ideas. But if I want to actually install something on that phone, then what I'm going to have to do, not joking, is act just like Windows. I'm going to have to go to that website, click on the thing that I wanted, have it downloaded, put it in the download folder, go over to the download folder, click it. That'll start the install process. And then once the install process is done, then I'll be able to see it on the start menu. Now, you think, well, that's what we do on Windows, so why is that a problem? Well, basically what happened, right, is that on Apple, they're thinking, how do we make it better? Well, the way we can make it better is having a store that they go to. So all they have to do is do a search, find what they want, click it, and it downloads straight to their device. And they don't have to worry about where did it install that, and where did the files go, and all that stuff. So on the Microsoft side of things, they were like, hey, let's just give people what they want, which is the same thing they have on their desktop, instead of actually thinking, what is it that people really want? How could we improve Windows to make it better on this device? Instead, it was just, let's just make it work like what we already have. That's a whole different thing, right? So then you get this iPhone, and in 2006, 2008, 2009, 2010, that's just like boom, taken off. And then that's whenever, BlackBerry disappears within a few years, right? It's that idea that Steve Jobs had already experienced. He got blown out of the water on the Mac thing. He made the wrong decisions there. And it did not take more than 2 or 3 years for that to just totally change. So get it right, and then you'll take that market. And that's what he was trying to do. And Microsoft, right, they just plodded away, and their thought process was everybody loves their stuff, so we'll be just fine. As a matter of fact, the first Android phone, which you can't do the search anymore because you can't find them. I'll be lucky if I can find them. Yeah, I don't see any of them. The first Android phone was basically looked just like, we'll say, the first BlackBerry. So BlackBerry was the big dog when they started thinking, okay, we're going to make a phone. And so when they're going to make this phone, who are they copying? They're copying BlackBerry, and that's what the Android looked like. Then, of course, once they get to see the iPhone, then they just say, we're going to make it look like that. That's what we're going to make it look like. It's kind of interesting thing that happens. All right, so to sum this up, we deal with Steve Jobs coming back with his OS of Next Step, which becomes Windows. It becomes OS 10. That's what they call it. We didn't call it Mac OS 10. So it becomes OS X. That's what I always called it. And then they would have version number after that. And so you're getting that stuff straightened out. They switch to Intel, which I'll just mention briefly here. So they can't get enough CPUs, haven't been able to get enough CPUs from IBM's PowerPC chip, which was really nice chip. And so they switch to Intel because Intel can provide them the chips that they need. So their whole basis switches to Intel. And then they create the iPod, which goes through the roof and kind of reinvents what Apple is at that time. And then they look at, we are going to lose everything because everything is in this iPod, and that's going to disappear from the market or slowly degenerate. And so what are we going to do? Well, we have to make this leap and make a phone. And then applying the same principles that they did all along the way, they said, how can we make this better? Because we're not going to just release this and have it be the same. That's why I think they haven't come out with a car, right? There's all this talk about them that they were going to make a self-driving car. And maybe they were, or maybe they were just testing Siri, I don't know. Or maybe they have some driving assistant that they'll sell to different manufacturers. I don't know. But if I wanted to use the past as a gauge, I would say, well, they probably started doing it. They realized that Tesla was doing a really good job at it, at looking at what's not in a car and let me update the car to be what it ought to be. And then all the other makers like Ford and Chevy and BMW are transforming themselves into doing the same thing. So as Apple, where do you come in? Where's your point? And so they may just be like, we're not going to do it now because there's nothing there there's no foothold for us to do that on. So that ends up with Steve Jobs and so on. And I think that's it for this video.